Good afternoon. It's great to be back with you again. I think it's been, Prague, Budapest, Lisbon, and now here. And so I think first and foremost, I would just like to thank Al and Lalit and the whole team that put the event on. I think hopefully, and I heard Lalit say this earlier today, hopefully the content that we'll go through over the next day and a half will be as good as the location that they've selected from a venue perspective. So thank you to the team overall. Look, I thought I would start with just a little bit around, I want to talk about the marketplace that we find ourselves in. Then I'll step through Oracle's strategy inside of that marketplace. And then finally, I want to talk about how we see partners growing with Oracle. So kind of three key topics that I'll go through here. And I think to start with, you begin with just, and it's kind of a common theme, I think, in every meeting that I'm in, every business lunch or dinner, we talk about the dynamic changes that are happening in the market, right? The seismic changes, and whether you want to look at it from an industry perspective where you see industry change, you see technology change. We'll talk about AI, machine learning, IoT, blockchain, how those technologies are changing industry, right? And then you begin to look at, some of the common data points are just since the year, I think 2000, half of the Fortune 500 is now gone. The life expectancy used to be 75 years for a Fortune 500 company. It's down to 15 years. It just emphasizes the point that your business model as just distribution, our business model as technology is under rapid change. So when you begin to think about strategy is constantly being refined and it's evolving. All right, and I'll step through that as we talk throughout the day. I think when you begin to look at the tech sector specifically, one of the things that we all struggle with in the channel is we've lived in a fairly stable tech marketplace for the last 25 to 30 years. Right? It's had a common number of players. The models have been very consistent. Now, granted, the last 5 years, it has really begun to move, right? So it's not like this has just started. We've been in that for about probably 3 to 5 years. But what's clear inside of our model right now is that it is cloud and it is emerging technologies that are reshaping our industry. Because we can talk about the Ubers, and we can talk about the Airbnbs, and we can talk about, Netflix, and how industries have been disrupted, have been changed, right? I was flying over on Sunday night, and I was reading an article about Marriott and how Marriott's going to compete with Airbnb. Everyone's being forced to step back and think about how they're going to compete and play in the marketplace. That includes Oracle, and that includes yourselves. And that's what we have to look at from a strategy perspective. I look at the Oracle strategy, and then my responsibility is to look at the distribution strategy, the channel strategy that will work with all of you. And when you look at the market we find ourselves in, so I want to ground ourselves in, although we have this tremendous shift that's happening, we also find ourselves in a very, very healthy market. Right? Because you just look at key indicators, and certainly x86 spend is a key indicator. And again, regardless of how you look at it, what data you look at it, strong x86 spend happening, right? Double-digit enterprise storage, strong double-digit cloud, right? So this conversation is not just about cloud. And again, you heard Al talk about, when I look at the market, when Oracle's looking at the market now, we see a balanced opportunity. It's balanced in both on-prem and cloud. So we have to really understand that as we work together on how your mix is going to shift and change and how our mix is going to change. But don't lose sight of there's growth on both sides of the market. And then I always like to ground myself around history, right? And so when you look at these generational shifts, right? These seismic changes that happen, and you look at our industry's been through this multiple times in our history. You can go back to the mainframe generation of computing, right? Where we went from mainframe to mini or departmental, right? And you remember, some of you might remember some of these companies, Digital, right? Data General, Wang. Certainly in IBM it was the System 36, 38, AS400. Those were all departmentalized systems. So the shift was going from a very centralized, mainframe-centric generation to mini. And then the next shift happened with Intel and Windows, Microsoft. That shift to a scale-out, self-build generation. And many of you probably remember what happened to these companies, because most of these companies on this chart went out of business, they were acquired, went bankrupt. Right? So we went through the seismic shift, mainframe to mini, mini to scale out. And for the most part, all of us in this room, we've made our career, we've been brought up through a self-build architecture. It was the customer's view was it was simply, less expensive and more efficient to build it myself than to buy it integrated. And that started to shift about probably 5-10 years ago. I would argue with Exadata, but I think Cisco UCS, you started to see these converged, hyper-converged, engineered systems. So the value began to shift from piece parts back into integration. And I would argue that cloud is the furthest level of integration right now, right? Typically when you're talking to a customer about cloud, you're not talking about what the x86 processor is, what's the operating system, right? All they care about is the service levels. How's it going to support my business? So you're seeing this shift, this seismic shift, away from that self-build generation into more of an integrated model, right? And again, if you look at where we've been the last 3 to 5 years, right? I mean, we're right in the middle of it right now, right? You can look at, whether you want to look at Dell acquiring EMC, because no one saw that coming, right? We look at IBM selling off its x86 business and other parts of its technology portfolio, HP splitting in two and declaring it wasn't going to be in the public cloud business. And then the most recent one, IBM acquiring Red Hat, right? And that's probably the most fascinating one because you look at the valuation of that, right? And you begin to look at IBM's going to pay around $33 billion for a company, right, that does about $3 billion in revenue. Inside the $3 billion of revenue, $2 billion is support services for open source operating system. So you begin to look at, so why did IBM reach for Red Hat? Well, it's real simple. That earlier chart about cloud and these emerging technologies reshaping our industry, IBM had to figure out how to become relevant in cloud. They'll look at that other billion around really that dev, test ops, type of space. That's where IBM will focus on scaling. Because if you don't do it there, the math won't work out on operating system support. Because Red Hat owns about 50% of the share today in the marketplace. So even if they doubled it and they got 100% of the share, it would only be $4 billion. You're never going to get that back on open source operating system support. So we have these dramatic shifts that create a behavior that change our landscape, our marketplace that we find ourselves in. And maybe the best thing for us right now is that earlier IDC chart on growth, because we're going through it right now, and there is tremendous opportunity and growth for both on-prem and cloud. We see that in the marketplace. Let me shift now into Oracle strategy. Where do we see ourselves playing in the marketplace? How will we compete? How will we, position ourselves? I think first and foremost, I want to begin with the core of Oracle, right? When you ask the question, what is Oracle's strategy? First and foremost, it'll be grounded with innovation, right? So we spend on average $5 to $6 billion a year on innovation, research and development. You go look at all the major competitors in this marketplace technology, and there's a really small number that spend that amount of their revenue on research and development. So we will innovate within Oracle. That's going to be a core part of our strategy, right, as you go forward. And when you look inside of that, you think of things like Exadata. You think about database. And underneath our P&L, you look at every major tech company. If you look at all the technology companies that you support today, every one of them has a core anchor in their P&L. You can look at IBM. Today, IBM is principally mainframe P&L, right? So you look at software, services, what drives their P&L? Still the largest single part would be mainframe. Microsoft, it's Windows, right? So you can go look at every single one. They've got a core anchor. Inside of Oracle, we've got 2 core anchors that drive the profit of our P&L. Not a shocker, database, right? But number 2 is ERP, right? We are number 1 in the world in ERP from an apps perspective. Now, I call that out only because when you begin to think about strategy and cloud strategy, which I'll get to in a minute, right? We're investing in innovation, and we're going to move to cloud, right? That's kind of a macro level view, but then the question is how and why we do that. So then if you begin to look at inside of our strategy, we deploy in 3 specific models, right? On-prem, cloud at customer, and public cloud. And in many cases, we created a new category when we launched cloud at customer, right? I hear some people refer to it as hybrid. Yeah, I guess it's a flavor of hybrid, but it's really bringing a public cloud model into our customer's data center. And when you think about migration planning, how do we take a customer from on-prem to cloud? Many of our big enterprise customers would say, I can't make that leap from on-prem to public cloud. But they will absolutely make the leap into cloud at customer. So strategically, we will strategically develop, deploy, and go after on-prem, cloud at customer, and public cloud. And then if you look at underneath the key products that we will drive that, let me start with on-prem, right? Because these are products that you all are very familiar with, right? So certainly, you look at the low end from a hardware systems perspective and ODA, right? Our ODA, the Oracle Database Appliance. By the way, 85% of all ODAs around the world go through the channel. Many countries, by the way, that's well over 90%, right? So, we made that a priority to drive an ODA footprint in the channel. Everything we do from the pricing, the model is a channel first kind of a model. That scales up into Exadata. And even our Exadata product, about 50% go through the channel. And globally, we have many countries and regions where Exadata is 80 and 90% as well. So you've got a model that we put in place where when you look underneath the systems portfolio and the core growth products, ODA, Exadata, ZDLRA, common thread is Oracle database, right? We simply, if you're going to run the Oracle database on-prem, it's simply going to run better on those platforms. If you're not familiar with ZDLRA, that's our backup and recovery appliance, right? That will simply allow a customer to have 100% recovery from any database issue, right? And again, all integrated for the Oracle database. So again, database on-prem is simply going to run better. And if you look at how we're performing in the marketplace today, I love this chart in the fact that when you look at our Exadata business for the last 2 years, right? Now, Exadata has been in the market about 10 years, right? The last 2 years have been the best 2 years in the history of Oracle on Exadata specifically, right? So the last 2 years have been the best 2 years. So in this point in time, when we have all this pivot in the marketplace going to cloud, the market growth I showed you earlier around x86 enterprise storage, that's where Exadata plays. Because what is Exadata? It's x86 processors and it's enterprise storage, right? All integrated and optimized on the Oracle database, right? And yet the best 2 years in our history have been the last 2 years. So again, when you think about our growth on-prem offerings, ODA, Exadata, ZDLRA, all doing very well inside of the current market dynamics, right? Now, I love to include this. This is about as technical as I get in my thinking. But many times when I'm with customers and partners, I'll get the question: so, what makes the database run so great on Exadata? And I'll go back to that $5 to $6 billion of investment. It's a lot of that's around the database, and it's inside of Exadata, which will carry forward to the cloud. This is just on this chart are 10 specific database capabilities that you only get on Exadata, right? It doesn't mean someone else couldn't go do this. It just means that we made the investment to do it to optimize on our platforms. So when we say, when you run the Oracle database on Exadata, it simply runs better. These are what the customers get as benefits associated with that. Take the middle one, HCC, right? That's hypercolumnar compression. What is that? That's simply database calls that compresses data that allows the data to run more efficiently on an Exadata than anywhere else, right? It's real simple. We made that investment. The customer gets that benefit. So as we begin to pivot to cloud, this is what we'll do in cloud as well. The same thing. Well, first of all, we will bring all of this. All of this exists in the cloud on our Exadata systems in the cloud as well. So again, you think about the on-prem, the benefits, why. These are examples where innovation in our strategy will differentiate our offering. And when we differentiate, we simply are allowed to create value, and that allows us, quite frankly, to retain a higher margin when competing against an HP or an IBM Power type of a system. Let me shift now to cloud, right? So you begin to think about the Oracle Cloud, and you really break it down. In the heart of what we do is we have three core elements to our cloud layer, right? It's applications, it's platform, it's infrastructure, right? Three core layers that we really drive, with cloud. And when you look inside of that, this to me is where we begin to enable a lot of the capabilities that I just talked about inside of Exadata, ODA, those type of capabilities. But let me start with just the footprint itself, because I know even in my meetings here, we've had conversations about where Oracle's been from a cloud strategy perspective, right? And if you look at where we are today, we are rolling out our OCI platform globally, right? Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI. This is just a map that shows you those data centers around the world. But the reason I highlight this is we are really just now pivoting and getting to a point where we can scale cloud globally. I believe Japan and Korea just came online in the month of May, right? And you can see some of the other planned data centers. I want to just reinforce with all of you that we're making the investment in the global footprint to be a global cloud player. Because I know in the last several years, in many cases, if you were working with an Oracle Cloud opportunity, many times that data center was sitting back in the United States someplace. And we're expanding that position. Inside of the cloud architecture, right, I just want to emphasize this point around cloud native, right? So our commitment, and this gets a little bit into how we will differentiate from a Red Hat, IBM, Linux stack versus Oracle. Inside of Oracle Cloud, we will be 100% open source, compliant and committed around the cloud native stack. And if you begin to look at where Red Hat is today, Red Hat has some absolute lock-ins. And when I meet with Linux customers today, or Oracle customers on Oracle Linux, the concern right now is that as you look at IBM, there's going to be a deeper lock-in around their development platform. Oracle, Larry, from the corporation on down, we will be 100% cloud native compliant. We will lead the way as it relates to portability at the application and technology level. So a really key part of the infrastructure we're deploying and building, the tools that we make available inside of our Linux support suite, right? When you compare Red Hat to Oracle Linux, Red Hat prices every one of those elements separately to the customer, separate contracts. So you look at Kubernetes, Docker, you look at the different piece parts, right? They're all priced and held separately. Inside of the Oracle Linux suite, we provide all that bundled together free to the customer. So you may find yourself at points in time, in a Linux conversation, in a simple world, if you look at what a customer is paying today for Red Hat Linux versus Oracle Linux, which, by the way, is the exact same software. There's no difference in the software. We're going to be about half the price, and we will bundle our service suite at no additional charge inside of that. Big difference in the marketplace. And then I mentioned the cloud at customer earlier, right? So you look at that model, that's taking a platform, so stay with Exadata Cloud at customer, and deploying that into a different model in terms of the financial flexibility. So again, we own that asset, right? Oracle owns the asset. Oracle manages the asset. The customer's contract with us is a public cloud contract. So really, really different approach to the marketplace. And then public cloud, you're going to hear more on the cloud, so there's going to be a much deeper level conversation on the cloud later. Kimberly will take you through that. But I always like on the public cloud, I like to make just a couple of key points, right? And I'm going to show you some use cases in a minute, but a couple of key points. First of all, in the upper left-hand corner, right? Make no mistake, our objective is at a raw infrastructure level to simply provide a better cloud at a lower economic value prop. Basically a lower price point. And we have tons of proof points around that. I think the other point is in the upper right-hand corner, right? Autonomous, right? When we begin to speak and talk about autonomous, I want to go back to that engineered systems chart, right? So Exadata is 10 years old. Autonomous is probably 10 months old. We're in the early days of autonomous. We're just beginning to ramp and position ourselves from an autonomous perspective. Right, so when you begin to think about that, we are going to simply make the Oracle database inside the Oracle cloud it's going to run better and cost the customer less. Can a customer run Oracle database in Amazon? They can. Can they run it in Azure? They can. It's just not going to run as efficiently and at a lower price point. And the reason for the lower price point is simply we will optimize that platform inside our cloud and the others will not. They won't make that investment to do that. So big, big difference to us. And then the lower right, I like to always call out because I've talked about Exadata, ODA. And so when you go into the Oracle cloud, when you go into OCI, right? OCI is x86 servers. It's commodity piece parts that we pull together running Oracle Linux. But in addition, we have dedicated Exadata, dedicated ODA. That's all part of the Oracle Cloud that we're bringing to marketplace. So number of different points here that when you look at our public cloud offering, where we are rolling it out globally, how we will differentiate, where we will add value in the marketplace, right? Key points here. And then you're going to hear, I think Han's going to talk a little bit more later on about the emerging technologies, right? So I started off talking about how these are shaping industry, changing companies, right? Including Oracle, including many of our customers. Big difference here is that from an emerging tech, we integrate that into our cloud offerings, into our platforms, right? So when you begin to look at machine learning, AI, IoT, blockchain, right? Customers come to the Oracle Cloud. They're not quite sure how to start with those technologies. So we have those offerings in our cloud service today that we can enable customers immediately on those platforms. So it's a big difference in investment in terms of how we're doing that within our strategy. And then finally, when you look at successes that we've had in the marketplace, right? I can certainly start in the upper left with Cisco, because I think Cisco's a good one to talk about just in terms of raw, competitive, head-to-head. I mean, in this case, when you look at the Cisco example, that was really head-to-head against AWS, right? And it was purely a performance-driven win case, so to speak, or use case, where we were 15 times better on a Cisco SaaS-based application that they moved from Amazon over to Oracle, right? One of our largest lift and shift of an ISV application that we've had. And we've got tons of other great references that are available to you. Now, I'm going to now shift to the final topic. So a little bit about the market, a little bit about Oracle strategy. Now I want to just spend a minute on how do we grow with the channel? How do we see that growth happening in the future here? So I want to start with I want to share some IDC data with you around some of the channel market dynamics that we're staring at to figure out how do we optimize our relationship with you? How do we make our relationship with distribution, with partners work for everybody? And so if you stare at this chart, I'll start in the upper left, right? So again, this is IDC data, not Oracle. This data is a survey they did that they concluded in December. And it shows it's about 500 partners, not distributors, but partners around the world. And of the 500, 85 were Oracle partners. So let me start in the upper left. First and foremost, what's really important to understand is that when you look at profitability and in terms of the Oracle Cloud and how partners make profitability, Oracle is as rich, if not richer, than our major competitors. You can see the comparison here to AWS and Microsoft. It's a specific statement around services, and I'm going to get to this a little bit deeper in a minute, but it's really talking about how our model, our business is shifting from an old model of hardware, software distribution to cloud, which is a services-oriented channel model. So really, really key. And then if you look at the bottom left, it tends to hone in on the percentage of reoccurring revenue that happens within inside of that. So again, a really big shift that we're seeing in the partners in terms of how they're building their business. On the right-hand side of this chart, it specifically talked about the value of distribution on-prem versus the value of distribution on cloud. So again, you step back and say, what is the value of distribution in a cloud-based model? I think all of us here are very clear the value in an on-prem model. And what the data really tells you, and to me as I stare at the data, and you can peel this back and there's a bunch of other data that you can go get and look at, but when I stare at this data, what it shows me is that the majority of our partners need help, right? And that's what that data shows when you see those bars outward of the 80% in terms of where they need help and why. So to me, it's a clear indication. So you talk about partner enablement. When you talk about services that you as a distributor can help and provide to your partners to enable their strategy. Our resellers need help preparing for their transition to cloud. So then if you go one level deeper, now this chart shows you the mix of Oracle business and how it has changed since 2015. Again, this is IDC data, not Oracle data. So it's going out to those partners and saying, tell me how your Oracle business has changed. And by the way, our data maps this data very, very consistently. So I think we all feel the natural size of hardware and software getting smaller on-prem, although still I would say very relevant and very critical to us. But the big shift is that our resellers are seeing a much stronger mix in their business around services. And I want to point out that a big chunk of that is on-prem services, 28% on-prem. So this is not just cloud, cloud, cloud. This is our customers, your partners, are providing to our customers a need that focuses around how do you move from on-prem to cloud. And that service capability becomes more and more important moving forward. So again, I think when you look at the dynamics that we're all managing and we're all kind of dealing with, it's this shift as we move towards a cloud model into more of a services-oriented channel distribution model. I do not want to lose sight on the balance we need to maintain the on-prem business because as I showed you earlier, there is tremendous growth on-prem. So simply said, we need to do both. You need to look at growing your on-prem business, hardware, software, right, services, growing your cloud business, right, cloud services, migration service type of capabilities. Now, what I'd like to do now is shift into 3 quick use cases on where we see partners being successful, specific use cases, specific plays. First of all, True Green is a large commercial residential lawn company in the United States, right? So they're a big player. But this use case is specifically I've heard it referred to as move and improve, lift and shift. You could call it modernization. But it's a use case that says we have a customer. In this case, they were running J.D. Edwards. It was J.D. Edwards running IBM's DB2 WebSphere on an IBM system. And all the systems were dated back to like 2003. So it was an older, unsupported environment. And they were kind of stuck. They couldn't really add on some of the additional J.D. Edwards modules because they were all unsupported. So they engaged the partner here, in this case Velocity, I think it's Velocity Tech in the US, and Velocity helped them migrate that environment over to OCI. Once they were able to get over to OCI, they got natural benefits just making that transition, right? And inside that transition, you can see the numbers, 30 to 40% less cost and improved performance. But that wasn't the real benefit that they got, right? Where their benefit came in is when they moved their J.D. Edwards over, they were then able to work with Oracle at adding new J.D. Edwards modules to work with the right APIs on their existing system, literally within like 60-day period. So really up and running. Great example of a use case of, I would say move and improve. You're going to lift up an existing environment, move it over. All that is services, but it's going to drive a pretty healthy ARR type of a model in terms of the actual contract that the customer that we have with the customer. Second use case I want to just spend a minute on is a little bit on autonomous, right? So autonomous and OIC, the Oracle Integration Cloud, not to be confused with OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. But this is, again, STOA, STOA is a digital marketing company in Korea. And they make their entire business is built around, digital marketing. They take campaign data, revenue, sales, and they analyze and they grind that out, right? But this was all running, again, in an older system. They needed much faster. They were trying to improve their speed to market, how they improved what they brought back to their clients, right? Again, in this case, GT Plus is a partner in Korea that's got deep Oracle skill. GT Plus helped move them to OCI, but the key here was they moved to the autonomous platform and they leveraged the Oracle Integration Cloud to bring together and basically take advantage of certain data analytics inside of our cloud that allows them to produce a more customized, improved delivery to their customer. You can see some of the scale time, the downtime, and the improvement in performance. Again, it's a great example of autonomous and the Oracle Integration Cloud. How do we integrate application layers inside of our cloud? And then the last one, this is similar to Cisco, right? So this is a straight up competitive win, and it's actually in India, right, where Adidas had a problem with a point-of-sale billing application, and it was running on Microsoft Azure. And they had latency issues. They had challenges, with performance inside of that. The application was very unpredictable, it was going up and down. They were losing revenue as a result. In this case, they engaged Sonera Tech, right? Again, another deep Oracle partner, and they were able to migrate to OCI. And you can see, again, straight up, 3x the performance, 35%. So look at this last use case. I just want to emphasize this point that when we're looking at lifting and shifting, when we're looking at certain cloud-based opportunities, what I want you to feel really good about is at an OCI level, as we roll this platform out inside of Oracle, it's one of the things I think Larry prides himself on is to stand up in front of his customers and audience, and he's just going to flat beat AWS. He's going to beat Azure as it relates to our workloads. Real simple, right? So really, really strong. Now, a couple of key points. As we look at the skills, so those three use cases, I would argue the partners that we have in those three use cases, their skill depth in Oracle and Oracle Cloud was very high, meaning they got the certifications, they got skilled, they went to the deep dive days that we've been hosting around the world. Another key part of what we're trying to do to enable all of you and your partners is on Sales Central. Because we have, I think you know this, and hopefully you don't. If you don't, please go to Sales Central because we have completely revamped that. There is all new collateral inside that. There's a mobile capability. Again, when you look at the capabilities inside of this, we have presentations, videos, test cases. So all of these references I'm referring to are all sitting inside of Sales Central. We made a decision about 18 months ago to make all of our content that we provide to our internal sellers, make it available to our partners. So make sure you're leveraging and taking advantage of that. The best data I can share with you is simple. When we look at our partners globally, and we begin to look at who are our highest performing partners, it is the partners that have the deepest skill. So you look at, certifications and how we measure all that. Partners that have deep skill, that have been enabled, that have made the investment, they simply have 2 times more opportunities, right? They close 60% more deals, and their deals are 3x larger. So all those things we measure inside of our pipeline and what we're doing in the channel, it becomes really obvious partners that are deeply invested in Oracle versus a partner that might be in and out really quickly in a one-time transaction, right? So it's critical from our relationship that we maintain our investment around enablement. All right, let me just conclude here quickly. This whole point about balance, right, and the balance between everything that you see from us in terms of strategy going forward, including the Oracle field teams, right? We made some pretty material changes June 1st. Our new fiscal was just whatever it was 10 days ago. Our field teams have been organized around on-prem and cloud. So we have field teams that are now focused on driving on-prem. We have cloud teams that are focused on driving cloud, driving autonomous. And just like you, we have to stay balanced because we need to capture the growth on both sides. And there is growth there on both sides. So let's take advantage of the on-prem opportunity because we've got leadership products in ODA, Exadata, right, that we have to take advantage of. So I'll leave you with 3 key points, right? Again, just closing back. The market specifically for Oracle offerings is strong, right? We have to take advantage of that balance I was just referring to. Second, inside of our strategy, you can certainly expect us to continue to invest and innovate in the market. Everything you're hearing about when you hear things like autonomous database, Oracle Integration Cloud, our alliance we just signed with Microsoft, right? Those are all things that I would put into innovation and how we're going to create value in cloud, right? So we got to stay on that because that's where with you, when we can create value, again, we can differentiate, and we differentiate, we win, and we can retain more margin in our deals. And then this last point about balance in our execution. Look, I know that was a lot in a really short period of time because they've been flashing that I'm 10 minutes over, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to be here for the next, whatever it is, day and a half that we're together. If I've touched on a point that you want to go deeper on one-on-one, please grab me, pull me aside. I know I have one-on-ones with many of you, but if not, just catch me in the hallway, and if not, if we don't do it here, then get with your Oracle channel team, and I'll be more than happy to do a call at any point in time. So again, enjoy the next day and a half. Thank you for your investment. Thank you for your partnership, and I look forward to spending the next day with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian.